Hello world! Welcome aboard of this fantastic episode about Visual Studio 2022. And today with me I have Mats. How are you, Mats?
Hello, Frank. I'm doing well, my friend. Thanks for having me on.
Super happy to have you again. It's not your first time on the Hello World, so very happy to have you back.
Yes, thank you for having me. It's my first time on your second season, so I'm pretty excited for that.
I am too. So Visual Studio today, but you have some guests with us. So what's the topic? What we'll be talking about more exactly?
So very recently we released Visual Studio 2022. It's our brand new, fantastic version of Visual Studio, the best version ever, and we have a lot of new and exciting features, and we need to show them to people, right? Because we're really proud of them and we want to show them off, and there's no one better to show off all the wonderful things of Visual Studio 2022 than Mark Downie.
No pressure.
Hi there.
So Mark, what are you going to show us today?
Today, the parts I really wanted to show, I'm excited to show everybody these are three of my favorite features. The AI-assisted whole line completion, that is using the power of machine learning and AI to help you with your debugging. I also want to talk about the new breakpoints that we have. We have new temporary breakpoints and new dependent breakpoints, which I think will help developers when they're trying to be as productive as possible. And then finally, I want to kind of end with the chef's kiss to me of development, which is hot reload, which allows you to kind of make edits and start getting into that debugging kind of workflow without having to restart your application. So
that's super cool. So that's 3 demo. So the next one, Mads, it's by you. So what will it be?
Yeah, I'm very excited for anything that lets me customize Visual Studio to me and my workflow. And so I have a great demo of some new stuff we can do to make Visual Studio feel more like our personal IDE.
Oh, wonderful. Very interesting. So if you're new to this show, the way we work, there's always like a short demo presentation, and then we have a live Q&A. So prepare your question. In fact, don't hesitate, put them right away in the chat. If they're not in the screen live, they are in the chat. So they're always there to answer your question. And we have one more segment today and it's a Diego's wall. So I know it's one of the favorite of people talking about a new learning path. So very interesting for that one. Today I have one more thing before we really kick off the show. And it's a question of the day, a question Hello World ask. In fact, my guest has to the audience to provide feedback. So do you want to share a little bit more about this question, Matt?
Yeah, I would love to hear from everyone out there. If you could add just one feature to Visual Studio, what would it be? So think big, think small. Is there anything in your workflow that would be help you be more productive if you had that feature? Let us know about it. Scan this QR code that you see on screen right now, or just type in the aka.ms/helloworld/Q5, and that will take you to a place where you can type in your answer to this question. So we'd love to hear it. And, the goal is, of course, to make Visual Studio the best it can be for as many people as possible.
Yeah, you know what? That question I thought first was really easy, but I thought about it, and I'm not sure I can decide for just one feature. So during the show, maybe I will read the answer of others, and maybe I will come with a better breakdown of just one. But it's hard. It's not that easy.
I agree. It's a hard question.
Yeah. So you know what? Now, what it's time to start our first segment.
Mm-hmm.
So I will let you kick off, Mads. Where we go?
Well, I think we need to go to Mark for this one, because this is a very, very interesting. It's a fan favorite. It has to do with the AI engine inside Visual Studio. And Mark, before we dive in, what is it that you do in Visual Studio?
Yes, I'm a program manager. That means I like to represent customers to our engineering team as much as I possibly can. And I like to think about debugging, profiling, and production diagnostics. So those are my areas that I focus in on for Visual Studio.
That's awesome. And so when we're talking AI, we're talking about a whole bunch of things that touches all sorts of areas of Visual Studio, right?
Exactly. So we started off this idea of AI as a simple IntelliCode kind of way of giving you a hint about what you might want to do next. Like, what property would I want to use in this context? What method might I use? And we've been building on this idea of AI and helping you more and more along your developer workflow. So the next step, obviously, from a single property suggestion, a simple method suggestion, is the idea of offering you the entire line of code you may want to write next. And again, we think about the context you're in. Are you in an ASP.NET app? Are you in a console app? Are you in an action of a controller? So we're kind of thinking about your context and kind of giving you a AI pair programmer, as it were, to help you as you think about what's the very best next thing I can do.
This sounds like magic, right? Having like a pair programmer sitting there next to you, kind of, right. But it's all built into Visual Studio, and you brought a demo, is that right?
We brought a demo. I think you'll like it.
All right,
Hey, Mark. So I heard there's now AI, some assistance in Visual Studio Code. So like, what's happening? Like, Visual Studio Code will be coding for me? No, well, seriously, how can it help us make us more productive?
So we've always had IntelliSense. We've had IntelliSense for a number of years now. But what we've been working on really recently is how we can make IntelliSense work better for you. So when we think about IntelliSense, we're really kind of usually thinking about an alphabetized list of kind of shortcuts to useful next steps in our code. However, I think you'll find now that we've empowered that with AI assistance together with IntelliSense, you'll find it to be way more productive and powerful for you and your development team. Let me kind of show you what I mean by that.
Definitely, I want to see it. Let's see it.
So let's just dive in here. I'm in my open source project here. I'm in this action controller. This is an ASP.NET application. So there's context here. Obviously, the code itself, there's a lot of code in here. I have multiple projects. But what IntelliSense does, what AI-assisted IntelliSense does, is look at the community and say, how can I help you make decisions? And it also combines that with your project. So I'm going to go ahead and hit a few enter signs, hit the enter and type if. And the AI assistant is going to think about what might be a reasonable next step for me, right? So as you can see here, it's actually not just suggested to me a shortcut to a potential API, but it's actually suggested what in the next whole line might be. And as you can see, it's actually drawn inference from line 62. So line 62 has unique link date, and it says, hey, what would be a reasonable step is to check if that's actually null, given that it goes from another method, right? And so that's interesting to me, because now I have my IntelliSense memory muscle can work for me. I can hit tab and accept that. So now literally by typing 3 characters, if, open brackets, and IntelliSense literally kicks in and starts to try to make a suggestion for me.
Yeah, very cool. Like it like way more than like completion stuff. Like that's really smart.
It takes the next level. It's looking at the community. It's looked at multiple GitHub projects and said, what kind of things does the community do? And more importantly than that, you can literally have this this kind of help you with maybe a new API. Your team is using a new type of API that the community uses. AI assistants can help you make decisions about how to fill out a brand new API. And again, it's in context. Let me show you another example of what I mean by context-driven. So this is, as I've mentioned, this is an ASP.NET application. Mm-hmm. So if I were to return from this action in this controller, normally for an application, returning usually has some kind of context. What have I kind of been doing inside here? But as you can see, AI knows that I'm currently sitting in an ASP.NET application and attempts to suggest to me, you can actually return the view. And that's the most logical and reasonable thing. But that's logical and reasonable for an ASP.NET MVC application. So this wouldn't be the suggestion you would get if you were doing a console app or a Windows Form app. But it understands the context. And so all your suggestions are kind of sit within a better understanding of your application.
That's really, really cool. So the AI knows where we are, what kind of project it is. So that's why it's suggesting that. And like definitely, yeah, big plus, because usually I would have to start typing views and maybe have an auto completion. So this 2022 version is definitely a big step forward.
It's a huge step forward. And I think this really comes into play when, like I said, if your team is learning a new API and one person has absorbed that pattern into the project, everybody gets to benefit from that collective wisdom and can use your API surface in the exact same kind of way because it's learning based on what you've currently put in the project.
I love it.
Absolutely awesome. Thank you, Mark. There is a question that I feel like we often get when it comes to the AI engine, and you mentioned that it kind of pulls data from GitHub and does some machine learning on top of like repos from around the world. Is there some concerns for privacy or security around your own source code when using IntelliCode? Do we have to be careful here, or how does this work?
Yeah, so to be sure, I think it's a reasonable question. But when we train a team model for IntelliCode completions on your code base, we don't share that model with anybody. So essentially, you got to think about it in two ways. There's a model we learn from public repos that we understand the context of developers and how they're working with their projects and their solutions. And that is what everybody gets to enjoy the benefit of, those public repos. However, when it's learning your particular solution, we don't share that with anybody. It stays on your machine. It stays with your team. You get to decide who gets access to that. We don't have control over it. It's all about you having complete control over your models and you maintaining those models for your team only. So our pros models work entirely locally. So your code never leaves your machine. That's just period.
All right, that's wonderful. I'm sure that a lot of, especially people that work in larger enterprises that have a lot of sort of security around their source code, would be happy to hear that that's how it works.
Yeah.
Frank?
I don't see a lot. Like there's a lot of feedback about the question of the day. People want tons of stuff. We'll get back to it. What interests me is, and one of it was having Visual Studio to code that for me. That's I like it. I'm not sure we'll have a job for long if I'm using that feature. But my question will be maybe very open. But what's next now with that? AI stuff. What else have you in the pipeline, or like can we hope for it?
Yeah, I think one of the main things we want to focus on, I think, going forward is the way in which we introduce new APIs, and maybe the way in which we can, I think it would be fascinating, for example, to introduce a brand new API and then at the very same time be able to have this AI assistant understand that API. So let's say we go to .NET 25, right? We have brand new APIs all over the place. We get the opportunity to kind of, with that, lend people the assistance, because that kind of bottleneck and kind of issue you kind of have when you're learning a brand new set of features. There might be opportunity for us to kind of collectively move everybody forward and speed up their kind of learning process. So basically, anywhere in the developer lifecycle, when you're typing code, we want to be able to sit there and say, how can we help developers be more efficient, be faster? So that's the kind of areas we're looking at.
I really like that idea. It's the whole like thinking IDE, right? The IDE is like one step ahead, kind of predicts what you're going to do next before you maybe even know it. And like, even though that's kind of, we have to balance that, of course, because you don't want to be annoying or too much in your face or whatever. If you strike that balance right, which I think we have so far with the AI engine and IntelliCode, this opens up for so many possibilities. It's just so exciting to see how you can, like, in the context the user is in, like, help them right then and there before they have to go online and search through documentation or anything like that, but keep you in the flow, keep you productive. Fantastic.
Well, there's a question in the chat. So we have Art Says Up. I don't know how to pronounce the full name, but is there a folder packed to train a model? Can we train it? Can we have control on that?
So it looks at your project, and I'm not sure I fully understand the question, but in context of a folder path, but it's going to be looking at the project and your solution as for ways to think about how it might train, how it might make other suggestions. So the question is, what does your project look like, and what kind of language suggestions can it infer from your project? So that's the way you essentially train a model. You essentially enable it with settings in Visual Studio, and then it takes what it needs from that project, rather than you saying there's an example in a particular folder. So it's going to learn basically from the entire project.
Okay, excellent. So it's not like when you do machine learning where like you have a train a model just by the fact that opening your solution, referring the API you're using, that's it. Like you did enough, Visual Studio will figure that out.
Yes, exactly.
That's pretty cool. I know we have a demo that is longer than usual, so let's move on, try to bank up a few minutes here. So let's move to the next segment.
Yeah,
and,
this is one I'm super excited for because, and this, Mark, is your wheelhouse, right? Because this is about the debugging and diagnostic stuff, and we got some cool stuff coming. What is the new stuff that everyone needs to know about in diagnostic?
Sure, my favorite things are the new breakpoints we have, temporary breakpoints, meaning it hits once and it essentially goes away. We've been thinking about the way in which you manage breakpoints a lot, because folks will have dozens of breakpoints all over the place. You'll have to go to the breakpoint page and decide which ones you want to get rid of, which ones you want to keep. And so we've introduced temporary breakpoints as a way for people to say, I need this on startup, but I probably don't need it anymore. We've introduced the idea of dependent breakpoints, which is basically, I only want to hit this breakpoint if another breakpoint is hit, which is, again, very incredibly helpful as a way to manage how you want to stop and pause and reflect on your code. And then we've also used this run to cursor, force run to cursor. We've always had run to cursor, but we've used this force run to cursor because, again, your project gets littered with breakpoints and you say, I actually just need to get through all of those breakpoints. I don't want to stop at any of them. So we've introduced new debugging features and tools to help you manage your diagnostic session.
Awesome. And before we get to the demo, I just want to remind the viewers to keep the questions coming. Ask in the live chat so that we can answer all your questions, right? So if you have any for Mark or for me or for Frank or about Visual Studio in general, let's hear about them. Now, let's roll the demo.
What else do you want to show us?
So I'd love to show you a couple of other things. We've been doing a lot of work with the debugger recently. So I don't know if you've ever had that situation where your code is littered with lots of breakpoints, and you may decide how to manage your breakpoints. We've had the breakpoint window for a while. The breakpoint window lets you switch on and switch off breakpoints that might exist. You can kind of manage that in some kind of way there. However, we've kind of been introducing not only ways to better manage your breakpoints, but also ways in which you can ignore them temporarily, because sometimes a breakpoints just get in the way of your debugging. They're helpful once you kind of got up and running, but sometimes you actually just want to kind of ignore them for a while. So I've just started debugging this particular project, and it should in a moment hit the line 43, and I'm going to sit and wait for that. And so it's hit line 43, and I might say to myself, I just want to get all the way down to here. I don't want to have to hit. See, I'm trying to make sure people save as many keystrokes as possible. You only have so many in a given day, right? So I want to save as many keystrokes for you as possible. So I want to get down to here without having to hit the continue button multiple times. And if I were to hit the normal force to run, it would actually stop at the next breakpoint. Mm-hmm. But I actually want to kind of go past that. So I'm going to zoom in here, and it would probably just stop at the next breakpoint. But if I hit the shift, you'll see it change the icon, the glyph a little bit, and it says force run to execution. And that will basically mean I'm going to ignore all of the breakpoints up until that point and just sit here at that particular line. And as you can see, I've completely gone past all the breakpoints that there. I didn't have to delete my breakpoints or disable my breakpoints. I can completely get around that. And again, these debugging steps are going to kind of just save you time. These micro kind of frictions to getting things done. We're trying to make sure we kind of smooth those out for you as you kind of develop code. So that's one way you could definitely do that, is by kind of skipping around breakpoints using our new shortcuts here. So I'm going to hit continue. And I'm actually I'm going to go ahead and disable these breakpoints because I want to show a few other types of breakpoints, if that's okay with you.
Yeah.
So let me zoom back out so you can see a little bit more context here. So what I actually want to also do here is kind of introduce a couple of other different types of breakpoints you can now use. So actually we have a thing called, I'm right clicking in the gutter here, and you'll see we have what is referred to as a conditional breakpoint. We've had those for a while, but they've kind of been a bit difficult to find, but that puts that front and center. The two I'm really, really interested in showing you today, though, is the temporary breakpoint and the dependent breakpoint. So a temporary breakpoint is exactly what it sounds like, right? You only hit it once. So I'm going to go ahead and navigate to the code. And it just went and hit that breakpoint. And as you can see, the glyph for them is gone because it's already hit it just once. So again, those times when you're checking startup and you know you only need to do this once and you need to get into your debugging, these breakpoints will disappear and clean up for you immediately as you're finished. So so again, think about those scenarios where you've kind of set these breakpoints all over the place and now you have to manage which ones to get rid of exactly. You can decide whether you want that breakpoint there or not. Secondly, there's another kind of breakpoint I want to make sure you're aware of, called dependent. So now I can say, I can right click again and do an insert a dependent breakpoint. And this time it's saying, well, I only want to enable this one if you in fact hit the one before this. So now I can have breakpoints based on other breakpoints rather than simply say, just go ahead and hit based on some condition. Maybe the condition's good, but also sometimes if I chose to stop at a previous breakpoint, I want to stop at this breakpoint. So now I have conditional breakpoints and temporary breakpoints as a mechanism for speeding up my debugging and diagnostics process.
So you don't even need to have a if statement. That's what I was doing before. I was adding a if statement in my stuff saying, oh, like when it's the name is equal Mark, then go there, and having some breakpoints. So now like I can manage that directly from the breakpoint. That's
exactly
awesome.
That's exactly it. So now I could have really complicated conditions that precede that, and only if it hits that one will it a second one. So I'm going to go ahead and I just refreshed. I'm just going ahead and refresh the site, hit the first breakpoint, and it's hit the first breakpoint. And because it's hit the first breakpoint, I can simply hit continue, and it's the second one. Mine's running a little bit slow. I think our meeting is eating up a little bit of my CPU here. But you can see that I can set up these conditional breakpoints. I can set up dependent breakpoints, and I can set these temporary breakpoints. All of these are really ways to kind of alleviate the pain we sometimes feel of managing our debugging session. I think you'll love it.
Wonderful. I'm really looking forward. But now, you know what we will do? We'll look at the question that the audience have for us. Yeah, so I want to make clear for everyone who's watching, when you stream, your machine is already taking, there's a lot of power for recording and streaming and stuff like that. So that's why sometimes in those demo, it's a little bit slower, but they're not lying. Visual Studio is super fast. I want to make it, and that's why I don't edit those deployment, because, I don't want to hide anything, but, streaming tax the machine. I want to know why not changing the behavior of a run to cursor instead of entering new variant?
Right. So we thought about that. What we were basically trying to do is ensure that, because it's actually a very popular thing to do, it's to run to cursor as it currently was constituted. So what we are constantly doing is talking to developers all the time. I mean, literally all the time. That's a lot of what I spend my time doing is watching developers work and asking them questions about the work. So run to cursor was incredibly popular in and of itself, with the context of it has to stop at every single breakpoint. However, there were scenarios where folks were saying, I just need a little bit extra on this. So rather than just modify what was a useful feature, we added another variation to that useful feature, and that force run to cursor was basically the answer. We kind of basically give you both the option of running to cursor and stopping at breakpoints, but also forcing the run to cursor and ignoring all the breakpoints.
So nice. Give more features.
I have another one. So the temporary breakpoint that you were showing off, like, why did you choose to add that? Like, isn't it just you can just remove it after you're done? Like, why have a temporary breakpoint type as its own thing?
Yeah, so one of the things we were kind of talking to developers, again, just talking to developers, you get a sense for where their frustration points are. Sometimes it's overt and it's obvious and they can articulate that. But other times you have to kind of watch their behavior. And one of the things we noticed about the behavior of developers is that they were doing a manual step when we could offer you a way to do it automatically. So if you're spending time in your development process, in your debugging process, doing something repeatedly, we're asking ourselves, is that a helpful thing or is that friction? And what we were finding out is that that was a subtle friction, and the amount of times you're having to manage breakpoints in your debugging session, we want it to be the most delightful hours you spend in Visual Studio. So if there's even a hint of a friction, we want to be there. And so we wanted to make sure that you can continue, frankly, with whatever kind of management of breakpoints you've figured out to this point, or you can use our new kind of temporary breakpoints and remove that friction entirely. So this is just a case of listening to developers, trying to figure out what would help them, and this experiment has been incredibly popular so far.
Yeah, I like that one. I'm happy. Like I will definitely have a lot of fun when I start coding. I have tons of stuff to do now in my Visual Studio, and I was like, yep, that's the one. I will spend way too much time at the beginning playing with the debugs and breakpoint and stuff.
Yeah.
I saw one question that is not necessarily related to like the debugger, but I think it's important to answer. People were asking, do they need to uninstall any previous version to install that new version?
No.
Yeah, no is the quick answer to that one. Yeah, it's these Visual Studios install happily side by side. So I have multiple versions because I'm always kind of experimenting with our development team, and they happily sit alongside each other. So I have internal experimental versions of Visual Studio. But for customers, yes, you can have Visual Studio 2019 right alongside Visual Studio 2022, and they will not interfere or bother each other. So as long as you've got this space, you can keep the variants you want.
Wonderful. So if the place I'm working on is not yet ready to move to that new version because like whatever people didn't validate it or approve it yet, I can install it just to play around, but still using the older version for my client's project.
Exactly.
That's wonderful. Yeah. Wonderful. I think it's time now to move to that next segment about hot reload.
Oh yeah. So this is probably, I don't know what you think, Mark, but I think that's the thing we've heard most loudly from customers that they absolutely love, and to the point where there's like they can't even imagine not having it after having tried it. So I'm like super excited whenever we have something to talk about and show for hot reload, and that's what you brought today, like hot reload for everyone, everywhere.
Everywhere, hot reload, all the things. So one of the things that we've heard from developers is that action of restarting your app. Let's say you're going through your debugging and I edit something and now I've got to start my app, rebuild, and start again. And there's kind of been an ongoing theme with my favorite features here is folks want to be as productive as possible, right? That stopping, rebuilding, and continuing debugging is an absolute pain. And we think this hot reload, which basically says, you've made a small change to your code, let me go ahead and introduce that to your debugging, the app you're debugging, without you restarting, and then you can continue to debug as if you had already done that restart. And this works across multiple apps. I'm talking about WPF, WinForms, ASP.NET Core, console apps, .NET MAUI apps, Razor files, CSS, XAML. I mean, we hot reloaded everything. And so we think this is going to really be a game changer for your productivity and the time you spend having to stop your app. You don't have to do that in nearly as many times and nearly as many places.
You know what?
You know what I
This is
discovered?
longer, so let's watch it.
Okay.
Mark, in all those features that are now available in Visual Studio 2022, and to help and boost the productivity of the developer, I heard of hot reload. So I come prepared, as you can see, but can you explain a bit more?
Yeah, I think hot reload kind of unlocks the true kind of productivity potential of developers, much probably even more so than only the other features we've talked about. I love hot reload because it kind of allows us to kind of think about our edit and development cycle in a much smaller time frame. So, for example, if I am currently editing or diagnosing a particular issue, or I may be adding something to a new WinForms app or some kind of other application, I might want to just see how the impact occurs without necessarily having to stop my entire application, recompile and kind of build and start the whole process again. That kind of rebuilding process really adds minutes, seconds, hours over the course of an entire day. And so the work we've done with hot reload is to reduce that kind of edit and see what I'm doing kind of time frame. And let me just kind of show you a couple of examples what I mean for that. I think maybe showing you is going to be a bit easier than explaining to you. So I've got this very basic, this is the scaffolding of a new ASP.NET application, right? Just the normal stuff you'd expect in here. It's got a H1 welcome. It's got a paragraph in here. And over here is that page. So if I refresh that, this is essentially giving me the results of this index CHTML. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to add a little bit more code. So this CSHTML is a mixture of HTML and compiled code. So actually what I'm going to do here is I've just pasted in this new text here, and in the line, I've put the @ symbol, which means I'm going to, after this line, it's going to be some code. And I want to get the OS version, which will be the OS version of the development machine I'm using. I want to know if this is a 64-bit operating system and a process. Now, normally, I would have to do a bit more work here. I probably have to stop to kind of get this work compiled because I've already built my application and it's running over here, right? But I'm just going to go ahead and hit save on this here. And if you noticed in this area here, hot reload has just wanted to tell, let me just zoom in there. Hot reload has just zoomed in and said, I'm sending updates to the running application that you're debugging right now. And I'm also going to it's also letting me know that it's updated and applied those updates to the application. So now when I refresh the page over here, the additional information I've asked for is immediately there. I haven't stopped my application. I haven't paused or edited my application. It just knows, Visual Studio with the framework knows exactly what to do with my changes now. And that's all to do, if you look at this new icon we have here, I'm just going to zoom in here. We have this hot reload icon right here. And that means that hot reload is enabled for this project, and any changes that it can manage to apply, it will just go ahead and apply them to my running application. So now I don't have to stop it. I don't have to pause it. I don't have to do any of those things to evaluate this scenario. I can have this continuous cycle of editing, verifying, editing, verifying, without having to worry about stopping my application. And I think developers will know instinctively that will do a lot to ensure that we are much more productive.
Yeah, because sometimes the solution or just a project could be long to compile. So now you're saving that, correct?
That's exactly right. I think the amount of time we spend with our rebuild, because we have these extravagant, huge projects, and sometimes build times are in the order of minutes, right? So now imagine us eliminating over the course of an entire day, over the course of an entire project, the amount of time we're spending just on the rebuild process. And I just want to actually do a little bit more, because I want to prove to you that I'm not doing any magic here, right? So there's no magic things. This is actually really, we are not restarting the process for you at all. So I'm going to put it in another line. And in this line, I'm going to say managed thread. And I want you to know that this is the system diagnostics process. And I'm going to say get the current process ID, right? So I'm going to go ahead and hit save. So this is the new line I've added. And I'm going to wait for it. I think it's just successfully updated. I think this was the latest upload there. So I'm going to head and refresh my page now. and refreshing. Now it's telling me that I'm using managed thread 33316. Perfect, right? So if this were not correct, if I had to stop this, I just want to show you an example. If I stopped this, I would get a brand new thread because it would be a different process, right? But what I want to show you is that I am now able to come in here. This is no magic tricks at all. This is just really happening. I'm going to go ahead here, if I can type this correctly. This is the same process. Not quite spelled correctly, but I think we'll get the principle. Just save that. I'm going to make sure that hot reload, yep, it's just sent the difference. So now our assumption here is that we should have the same ID here. So I'm going to go ahead and refresh. It's the same ID, but a second. Make sure that's saved correctly. Make sure that's sent to the update. That's sent the update and refresh. And there we go. Took a second for it to update. But here we have 33316. It's the same process ID. I haven't tricked you. This is if Visual Studio had restarted this, I'd have got a fresh new ID here. But this is the same process ID. What is going on in the background? The framework is able to say, Visual Studio is able to hand just the delta of the code changes I made to the framework and say, hey, this is the difference between what you have and what I've just got. And the framework is able to really efficiently grab that difference and apply that while still running the process. It's really, really a fascinating stuff. It really applies to multiple situations. Obviously, this is an ASP.NET MVC application, but this could apply to, WPF, WinForms, .NET MAUI, some native scenarios even, WinUI 3. All these scenarios are positively impacted here. And I absolutely love it because I think this is one of the game changers that are going to make us way more productive.
And I hear you talking about different scenario. I think you want to show us one more quickly. Am I right?
Yeah. So there's actually, those developers out there that are focused on web front end, this actually works for you too. In fact, I think this is one of those things that Visual Studio has possibly lacked in the past, where if you wanted to make change to your HTML or your CSS, you wouldn't see those immediate changes. So let's look at this particular page here. If I were to look at this welcome sign, in fact, this is what this welcome sign is, a H1 class here, a H1 tag, and there's a display for class associated with it, right? So actually what I can do here, just like developers, I can start to manipulate the CSS. And if you looked really closely there on the left, you would have seen the change happen occur immediately. And just to be clear, I'm going to change that to 1. Welcome's updated. See that? And if you notice, I haven't even.
Yeah, I was about to say, like the status of the file didn't change yet.
Didn't change yet. Hot reload is understanding my intent here and immediately pushing my change straight over. So I get the chance I can be that kind of web developer, really fast iterations on design, which is another big part of development, right? So as you kind of experimenting with these design ideas, you can do so straight from Visual Studio and let hot reload kind of push those changes directly to your web UI.
Wonderful, thank you. And now let's go back to the chat.
That was fantastic, Mark. They were great demos. I really like the CSS one. I'm a web developer myself, so I'm like really happy to see that. Awesome.
Yeah, that's the one I love the most.
You did say that, a hot reload all the things, but are there things that are not hot reloadable?
Yeah, there's a couple of kind of edge cases that I guess are reasonable to talk about here. Xamarin Form apps, for example, don't currently support hot reload in iOS and Android scenarios. And I think what the F# for the F# language, again, that there's some .NET native that will not support hot reload. That's kind of a narrow compared to, I guess, the entire suite of projects and tools and features and languages we have. That's kind of a narrow set, but those are two that we currently don't have hot reload support. But again, as I mentioned, native C++ was one we landed early. XAML, CSS, Razor file editing, which I showed, Blazor apps, server and WebAssembly. WPF. These are all supported with hot reload scenarios.
All right.
I love it.
Awesome.
I love it. You know what? Well, hold your question. Let's move on to the next segment. I want to make sure I have time for everything, and we'll just extend the last live Q&A. So the next segment is Diego's wall, and I know people love Diego's and all his story, and it's always very inspiring. And today, you want to talk about a new learning path that is soft skills. So let's watch this video. Hello, Diego. Very happy to see you. How are you, my friend?
Hello, Frank, and hello, world. Yes, this is Diego broadcasting live from my office in Seattle. As you know, Frank, I'm surrounded by these walls that I use to nurture my own sense of wonder, but also to share this with others, with you. And today, I actually want to share this post. It's a phrase that I like, and it goes like this. It says, "It's not about the product people make. It's about the people that make the product." Sounds a bit counterintuitive, like many of these phrases, but again, it's not about the product people make. It's about the people that make the product. If there's something I learned in these 20 years at Microsoft, Frank, and audience, is that the products we make are a reflection of who we are. So that's why, for example, diversity and inclusion is such a big push right now in the tech industry, because we want the team to represent all of the consumer base that we're trying to reach. But it goes beyond D&I. People's characters showed up in the product. If there's a product led by someone who is detail-oriented, the product will likely be detail-oriented. If the person leading a team values elegance, it's probably going to be an elegant product. And things like that. I learned that also, like, relationships between teams show up in products. If teams, because all these products that we make at Microsoft require multiple teams. If teams like each other, talk to each other, then the product will show up as integrated solution. If there are people who don't like each other or don't talk to each other, or maybe there's a time zone difference and they don't meet enough, there's not enough communication, then the team will show the product will show those themes. So I guess what I'm trying to say, Frank, is that, of course, we have technical problems to solve, but there are even harder problems, which is the people problems. Because when you're trying to ship a product, for example, when I worked on the Xbox, it's about 1,000 people trying to build this gaming console, the hardware, the software, and the dynamics between those people will have a direct impact on the quality of the product. So today I want to recommend something to you, Frank, and the audience, and that is that there's a colleague of mine. Her name is Margaret Price. She's a design strategist who wanted to teach this to the world. And she used this platform that we have at Microsoft called Microsoft Learn. If you go to docs.microsoft.com, not only you will find the documentation of all our products, but you will find learning paths with learning modules where you can learn a lot of things, mostly technical things, coding, programming languages, cloud, architecture, and things. But thanks to Margaret Price and the content and learning team, we actually now have a path called Tech Resiliency, how to survive in the tech industry, how to succeed. And I just want to recommend that here. Oh, hey, hi, Frank, I see you on the other side. We have here, you can see here the list of the modules. Each one of these modules comes with text, audio, it has little cartoons, animated people like telling you stories, and it talks about things like growth mindset, which is about understanding we all make mistakes and it's a learning journey, or self-efficacy. Self-efficacy is a new word that I learned. It's not self-confidence. It's self-efficacy is different. You have to check it out, but it's about knowing that you will eventually gain confidence. There's another one about the sense of belonging. If you feel you're an outsider, you won't be able to contribute at your best. Emotional intelligence, giving and receiving feedback, that's easier said than done. Cognitive flexibility, everything that we are inflexible about, that we are too extreme about, at some point, the rug will be pulled from underneath us. We need cognitive flexibility in a field that is constantly changing, where radical innovation is necessary. So there's a module on cognitive flexibility, as well as mirroring and coaching and active listening. Remember, this is the most attractive organ in the human body, is the ear. We all like to be listened to, understood. So that's what I wanted to share today, Frank. Makes sense?
I love it. I love it. And this is all a learning path. So it's on Microsoft Learn.
It's on Microsoft Learn, which is part of docs.microsoft.com. It's actually free. So you can go, it's free. You get credits and points that you can badges, and it's like a free university for you. And what I love about this one is, as I said, tech is not just about technical problems, which you learn at school, but this is also about people dynamics. And if you want to be resilient, if you want to last 20 years, like I'm about to do soon in the next couple of months, then you got to learn these things. So that's all I have for you today. I'll have more for you next time.
Wonderful. See you next time. Bye. And save. Excellent. It's now in the show notes because I forgot to put it there. Talking about the show notes, all the links, all the thing we're saying, it's all in the show notes. The link. Sorry, the link. I'm too excited. The link showing in the bottom of the screen. Everything is available there. All the links, more details, the question of the day, everything is there. That's super cool. And now, Matt, it's your turn to shine and show your demo about how to make Visual Studio ours.
Yeah. Should we jump straight to the demo, or should
no? But
okay.
I want to validate. Are you ready for that?
Well, yeah, because what's really, really interesting is that when we look at all the features that Mark showed, which was a bunch of really, really cool stuff, and some of them are really big, and it took us a long time and a lot of engineering to pull them off. A lot of things come in from feature requests that we receive all the time. Every single day we get feature requests. If you go in Visual Studio Help, send feedback, we get all of those every day. And we have seen over time that things that make Visual Studio feel more personal or customizable is something that people just constantly yearn for. And so we've been putting a lot of things in that are may not be like your big productivity features, but it's something that helps Visual Studio feel like home. And you can customize it to your will. And so we have a bunch of those. We have over 80 of those, actually over 100, in Visual Studio 2022. New feature requests implemented, and some of them has to do with themes, color themes, and it's now much easier to build color themes and to import color themes, use them, find them, and all this sort of stuff. And on top of that, we also have a new way of writing Visual Studio extensions. And there's a cool little thing that ties theming together with Visual Studio extension, and brings VS Code into the mix. And I have a demo to show that off.
Let's watch it. We saw very interesting demos, but I'm curious, Matt. So from all the features included in Visual Studio 2022, is there any coming from requests from users?
Yeah, a lot of them are, in fact, coming from users, because inside Visual Studio, you can go to the Help menu and then send feedback, and you can ask for features there, and people have. And so we have over 100 feature requests in Visual Studio 2022, and there's really cool stuff for personalization or customization, because it turns out that people really, really want to make Visual Studio their own, and they want to decide, what theme to use, like color theme and font sizes, and also the font types. We have some new things like color tabs that colorizes based on project, and other things that comes directly from feature requests by users. And so that's very, very cool. There's over 100, as I mentioned, and there's a lot of votes. People have really voted for a lot of these things. So it's great to see a whole bunch of things that makes personalization easier in Visual Studio.
Oh, that's awesome. You know what? We'll have in the show notes the link where people can make sure to understand and vote and see all the feature. But tell me more. So do we have new themes? What are the colors or like the themes we have right now?
Yeah, so we have a brand new dark theme. So we've had the dark theme for quite a while, but in Visual Studio 2022, we now have a new one that looks super crisp. I really, really like it. So now we have, out of the box, there's the light theme, the blue theme, and the dark theme.
Okay.
But there's a whole bunch of themes available out there, and we made it much easier for you to install and select the themes, but also how to create the themes. So as a brand new thing, we have a way to convert any Visual Studio Code theme to Visual Studio.
Oh my God. Okay, and I'm guessing now you will be showing us exactly that.
Yes, let's take a look.
Love it. Let's have a look.
So the first thing we want to do is that we want to open our extension dialog here to make sure that we have a new extension called Extensibility Essentials. This is an extension that helps us write extensions, and that's exactly what we want to do today. We want to write an extension that has a theme in it that we can share with everybody else by putting it on the marketplace so others can download and install it. So we want to make sure we have Extensibility Essentials. And then we're just going to create a new project. And I'm just going to search for the word V6. And I'm going to create an empty V6 project. And this is going to contain a theme from VS Code. And if we go to VS Code, I got a theme installed here called the GitHub theme. And actually it contains a few different ones. One of them is called GitHub Dark. So that's what I want to call so GitHub Dark theme. That's what I want to call my project here. So that's it. It's a very simple little project. Now, back to VS Code. What I can do is that I can, when I've enabled the theme that I want, in this case, the GitHub theme, I can go to the command palette and invoke the command for generate color theme from current settings. I'm going to click that, and that's going to give me a very, very large JSON file. And I'm going to save this straight into here. We're going to give it the name. I'm going to put it into on the file system to where my Visual Studio extension project I just created is. And we're going to call it GitHub Dark. Let's save that. So now going back to Visual Studio, I can show all files here. And we can now see we got the GitHub Dark showing up. I'm going to right click and say include in project. Now that's going to take a little longer here than it normally does, because what happens is that automatically, from using that extension called Extensibility Essentials that I just mentioned, it will automatically recognize that this is a theme file, and then it will produce the Visual Studio version of that. And let's just take a look. This is not exactly JSON, right? There's no way you can really write this by hand. So that extension brings in a tool that can convert the JSON file to what's called a package.def file that Visual Studio understands. And now all we have to do is to open our manifest file. This is where we have our sort of metadata around our extension here. Mm-hmm. We're going to make sure it has a good name. We could say that, a description could be a port of the popular GitHub Dark theme for Visual Studio Code, right? So I want to make sure that has a good description, a good title. And then all I have to do is to include this file that was generated. It's called a VS package. Include a new VS package, point to a file in the file system, and it already found the package.def file here. So I'm just going to say OK to that. And that's it. So I can now run this hitting F5, or I'm going to hit Control F5. I don't really need the debugger for that. And so now we're actually spinning up a Visual Studio extension by first compiling it and then opening a new instance of Visual Studio. That happens automatically as part of the build process here. So Visual Studio starts up. It already has the extension that we're building here installed. And I can now go in to the Tools menu and see we now have a theme fly out here under the Tools menu. And I can select GitHub Dark. So let's go ahead and do that. And boom, there it is.
And boom, voila, awesome. That and I was expecting a little bit more work. It's super easy.
It's super easy. And then you just go in afterwards, open your bin directory here, and you can see you have a file called a .v6 file. That is your extension. You can now take that file and you can upload that, go to the marketplace.visualstudio.com and publish that for everyone to use.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yep.
And I'm sure people will have tons of questions. So you know what? Let's go see the chat and answer those questions.
Sounds good.
I have a question. I will start by my question. Now that you have that Teams done, will it work with previous version of Visual Studio?
It won't. You need 2022. So it will kind of work with previous versions, but there will be some colors missing. So depending on kind of what type of workload you have installed with Visual Studio, what components you install, your mileage may vary. But we do say that, we recommend you use Visual Studio 2022 and newer just for this to work the best.
Well, that's fair. I think, like you're introducing new feature, it's always hard to retrofit. Is it the proper way to say that?
Yeah, right. And one thing that I actually forgot to mention was that you can also now set the theme to automatically switch with the Windows theme. So a lot of people, they have a light theme during the day, and then automatically at sunset, Windows changes to dark mode.
No way.
And you can have Visual Studio listen to those Windows events and do the exact same thing.
That's cool.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool.
Oh, yeah.
And can anybody can create teams, or you need to be like a validated, I don't know, like member of the community or something?
No, everyone can do this. And let's just take Yuma's question here. There's too many steps. Well, this is not about taking a VS Code theme and just using for yourself. The demo here I showed was how we can take a VS Code theme, convert it to a Visual Studio theme, and then create an extension out of it to share with everybody on the marketplace. So yes, there are more steps because we're not just consuming it for ourselves. If you just want that, it's basically just running a command line on that JSON-C file, and voila, you're done. A command line tool that's available.
That's pretty cool. So we have about 2 minutes left for questions. So now is the time if you have a question. I saw previously people were asking about an extension called Web Essential that is apparently not yet in Visual Studio 2022.
Right. So Web Essentials was an extension for web developers that came out for Visual Studio 2010 and has existed for every single version so far. But I have not released one for 2022, at least not yet. And that has to do with some changes in the APIs for certain aspects. But what happened was with Web Essentials is that it's actually an extension pack made of multiple smaller extensions. And a bunch of those smaller extensions, almost all of them, have actually been ported to work on Visual Studio 2022. So Web Essentials itself as the extension pack might not be there, but go grab the individual extensions and you're probably good to go there.
Wonderful. We have about less than a minute. Anything you want to add about some question that I could have missed in the chat, or like things that you forgot to mention in your demos?
There was one question about what desktop framework to use for Windows and maybe to run everywhere. WPF, UWP, Maui, etc. And I think, and we talked about it, and I think, Mark, you said, well, Maui is the future.
Yeah, to be sure. I think if you're thinking about the idea of building native client apps across multiple platforms and OSs, then I think .NET MAUI is the one for you, because it essentially kind of think about it as an abstraction layer over each of those individual concerns. It sits at the top and is able to kind of allow you to have one code base that represents Mac OS, and one code base to represent iOS, and one code base to represent Android and Windows, of course. So if you're thinking about, targeting multiple app platforms, that's the way to go.
Wonderful, wonderful. It's already time to wrap up, so I just want to show back again the question of the day. Answer that. I will let the question there for like a few days, so even if you're watching in a video on demand, please answer. If you had only one feature, if you could add one feature in Visual Studio, well, what would it be? You can scan it. You could use that short URL. Please answer. The feedback will be bring to the team. And coming up next is one dev question, and they will be talking about Win UI. So stay tuned for more, and I will see you tomorrow for my 100th episode of Hello World. So come back tomorrow, and I will see you there. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you, guys.